You know, for so many people, becoming a pilot is the dream. It's all about freedom, adventure, seeing the world from a whole new perspective. But what if I told you that for most people who start, that dream, it never really gets off the ground? We're going to dive into why the reality of flight training is a lot more complicated than you might think.
Okay, just look at this number, 80%. According to industry reports, that's how many student pilots drop out. That means 4 out of every 5 people who were excited enough to sign up for flight training will quit before they ever get that license. It's just a staggering statistic when you think about it.
Which, of course, brings up the big question, right? Why? What on earth is going on between that first thrilling flight and the final check ride that makes so many people just give up on a lifelong dream?
All right, let's start with the obvious stuff, the reasons you and I would probably come up with first. Because the practical and financial roadblocks, they are very, very real, and they stop a lot of aspiring pilots dead in their tracks.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. It is no secret that learning to fly is expensive. We are talking about a massive financial commitment. It's tuition, course materials, exam fees, equipment, the list goes on. And for a lot of people, the sheer cost is the first and, well, the last barrier they hit.
And look, it goes way beyond just the money. The day-to-day logistics can be an absolute killer. Just listen to this from a student pilot named Andrew. Can you imagine 5 different instructors dealing with people just not showing up and even a tragedy? That level of chaos and inconsistency can derail even the most motivated person.
So money and scheduling are huge hurdles, for sure, no doubt about it. But what if that's not the real story? Some fascinating research suggests that the true deciding factor behind that 80% number isn't what's happening on the outside. It's what's going on inside a student's head. So, a really cool study dug into this very question and found something fascinating. They honed in on one specific psychological trait that seems to be the main driver separating those who make it from those who don't. And they called it the grit factor.
So what exactly is grit? Well, the official definition is the tendency to sustain passion and perseverance for long-term goals. But think of it this way. It's stamina. It's not about having some raw talent or getting lucky. It's about sticking with your future day in, day out, and just working your tail off to make that future a reality.
And this kind of grit, it's often hammered into you by experience. I mean, check out this quote from a student pilot named Jasper. His time in the military gave him a simple, incredibly powerful motto: Night Stalkers don't quit. That's a high grit mindset, right there in its purest form.
But here's the thing, grit doesn't work alone. The researchers found it's totally linked to another big idea, your mindset. And specifically, it comes down to whether you believe your abilities are just fixed from birth or if you think they can be developed over time.
Okay, before I break down the 2 mindsets, I want you to look at this statement. It's from the actual survey they gave the student pilots. It says, you can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are can't really be changed. So would you agree or disagree? Seriously, think about it, because your answer says a lot.
And that question really splits people into 2 camps. On one side, you've got the fixed mindset. This is the belief that your intelligence, your abilities, they're just set in stone. That's who you are. And on the other side, you have the growth mindset. This is the view that those same qualities can be grown and developed through sheer dedication and hard work. Now, when you're trying to learn something as crazy hard as flying, which one do you think is going to serve you better?
Okay, this is where it all comes together and gets really interesting. Let's hear from the student pilots themselves and see how these big ideas, grit and mindset, actually show up when things get tough in the real world. Let's take one single event, a failed check ride. I mean, that's a real gut punch for any student pilot. It's a huge setback. But what's fascinating is how differently people react to that exact same failure. The reactions are just worlds apart. So first, listen to Andrew. Remember him? The guy with the 5 instructors? Well, when he failed his commercial check ride, his reaction was to laugh about it, to find the humor, and more importantly, the lesson. He saw it as just a bump in the road, a story he'd tell later. That is a growth mindset in action. Now, hold that thought and listen to Peter's take on a similar failure. His words just paint a totally different picture. For him, the failure isn't a learning moment, it's a knockdown blow that's incredibly hard to recover from. It's the same event, but a profoundly different internal experience. It's night and day, isn't it? So, okay, handling failure is one massive piece of the puzzle. But what about the other side? Motivation. We're talking hundreds of hours of study and practice.
How do you keep going day after day, week after week, when the finish line feels so far away?
Check out what a student named Mike had to say. His motivation? It's all internal. He talks about training his own mind, about fighting back when it tells him he can't go on. He's basically his own coach, his own engine, reminding himself that nothing is impossible if he just keeps trying.
And then there's Harry. His approach is different. His fuel comes from the outside, from other people believing in him, like his family and friends. Now, that's not a bad thing at all, but the study did find that the people who really stick with it, the ones with high grit, tend to have that strong internal engine.
All right, so what's the bottom line here? What's the big takeaway for all of us? Well, even if you never, ever plan to step inside a cockpit, the lessons from these pilots can help you build your own flight plan for any big, long-term goal you've got.
You know, when you look at the students who actually made it through, they all shared some key strategies. They didn't just try to tackle the overwhelming goal of becoming a pilot all at once. No, they broke it down into smaller, manageable steps. They would visualize their success to stay motivated. One student even said he'd just go to the airport and watch planes take off. They learned to see criticism as a gift for getting better. And maybe most importantly, they saw failure not as the end of the road, but just as another piece of data on their journey to success.
And that really brings it all home. These principles, having grit, cultivating a growth mindset, being strategic about how you handle failure and motivation, they're universal. They work for learning an instrument, starting a business, getting a degree, anything. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What big, long-term goal in your life could use a flight plan just like this one?